Thank you, and it's great to be here. And you know, the best thing about riding the bus is if you're, I guess we're friends here. You don't have to tell everybody this, but I'm actually from New England. I'm not a native Nashvilleian. And if you ride the bus, you end up at the Music City Central downtown, and you have Dunkin' Donuts. And of course, America runs on Dunkin', and so you get rewarded for taking public transportation. I try to do that once or twice a week, and I'm able to do it almost every week. It's the buses are clean, they're safe, the people are friendly. You get there much more comfortably than you can if you're driving yourself. You get to read and meet people, and it's a good thing. And it's really key for the future development of the city that we have a transportation system that attracts people to Nashville. It's not what I want to talk about, but while I'm on the subject, let me just mention that in the last year, the cities that I compare us to the most, that I think we're sort of competing with, and that we, in a friendly sort of way, we need to have to set challenges for each other, are Austin and Charlotte. And it has not been lost on me that both of those cities have started light rail systems in the past year. So we have a challenge, and we just need to measure up to it, and I think we can. What I thought I'd talk about today, since given the subject matter of these talks and the relationship of this series to the professional schools at Vanderbilt, is basically how I got where I am and how it relates to what I'm doing. I'm a Vanderbilt law graduate. I came to Tennessee, I came to Nashville in 1978 because of Vanderbilt Law School. As I said, I grew up in New England. I went to college in New York, and I wanted to see a different part of the country, and Vanderbilt came very highly recommended. So I came down here literally sight unseen in 1978 to enroll at Vanderbilt. And when I came to law school, I'd always thought I'd be a lawyer. To me, nobody in my family was a lawyer, but it seemed like a profession that would be rewarding not only intellectually, but also in terms of the type of work that you could do in terms of helping people. But when I got to law school, I really kind of just focused on how to get a job and how to sort of move ahead. And I think there is sort of intrinsic dignity in almost every profession that you do, because there's structure to it, and there's rules, and there's things that govern the profession that make it worthwhile, but also give it a sense of meaning that is lost in a lot of other areas of life. And you can do whatever you want to do in the legal profession and play a very meaningful role in society. If you're a great real estate lawyer, or you're a great person doing wills and trusts, giving business advice, if you're living up to the professional standards, you're playing an important role. And as I got involved in law school, I didn't think much about doing anything in the public interest law. I mean, it wasn't, I don't at all criticize the law school for this, although I think the law school is much more proactive now in encouraging students to look at public opportunities and public jobs and public interest. But I didn't look at that at all. I immediately started thinking about working in firms and started thinking about just how I was going to pay off some of my debt that I was rapidly accumulating. So while I was in law school, I focused on sort of corporate matters. I went and worked on Wall Street between my second and third year of law school for a large firm that was, I guess eerily, located on the 100th floor of the World Trade Towers. And I worked there for a summer. And then when I got to law school, I went to work for a small, not small, actually, it's the largest law firm outside of Boston in Massachusetts, in Worcester, Massachusetts, which is kind of the area I'm from, and loved it. But while I was there, I kind of developed a niche where I was doing, representing clients' kids who got in trouble, or employees of corporations who had little criminal problems. I mean, very little criminal problems. But I really liked it because I got to meet the client. You know, when you're in a big law firm, if you're a young associate, you don't really get to hang around with the clients that much. And I got to go to court, and I got to talk in court, and I got to do things. And so when my wife, who's a Nashville native, informed me that I was going to live in Nashville, when I came to Nashville, back to Nashville in '83, I wanted to work in the public sector. And I came into it with a real bias. I really felt that, you know, if you wanted to be an excellent lawyer, you had to be in the private sector. If you wanted to be a great trial lawyer, the only way you could do it is if you worked for some big powerhouse firm or some really special boutique law firm. That was the only way it could happen. So I looked for a job. I decided I wanted to go a different route, though. And so I wanted to be a criminal lawyer. And so I thought that you had to either work in the DA's office or the public defender's office. So I applied to the DA, and I applied to the public defender. I was I could do either. It's like the classic lawyer morality. I can argue both sides for a fee, whatever the fee is. So I applied, and there was no opening at the DA's office, and Jim Weatherly was the public defender then, and Jim interviewed me and hired me. And I'll tell you this, that's one of the most important things that happened to me in my entire life for a variety of reasons. One is this: Jim Weatherly and the lawyers I met in the public defender's office, but particularly Jim, who's still in practice here in a great firm, was the best trial lawyer I'd ever seen. And I still say that. He is the best trial lawyer I know. And here he was in the private sector. And so I met other lawyers who were DAs, who were public defenders, who were committed to excellence, committed to doing good work, working in the public sector, working for salaries much below what they could make in the private sector. And that said something to me. And I also learned that if you wanted to be a good lawyer, if you wanted to be a good trial lawyer, you could do it by working for the public interest. You just had to set your mind to it, make it a goal. And so I worked as deliberately and as hard as I could to get the training, to work with good lawyers, to become the best lawyer I could be. And I enjoyed it immensely. And the other thing I learned was, and I blame myself for this, because I could have learned this in law school, and I just didn't, that the work I was doing as an assistant public defender, just starting out, I'm representing people accused of public drunk, trespass, DUI, and we're not doing sexy type cases. And I'm doing a lot of them. But it really was rewarding. I mean, I would go to work every day, and I felt like I helped people. And it was interesting. And it was intellectually interesting. But it was really rewarding. And so it's a little embarrassing to say that it took me to some point in my mid to late 20s to figure that out. And so looking back, if I had advice for people, young people, I would say when you're in professional school, when you're working your way through your career, take the time to try the public sector, try the public interest thing. Or if you're totally been devoted to the public sector, look at the private sector. But just getting that experience and seeing that maybe there's something there for you is important. The other thing that came out of working as a public defender, and I did it for a long time, I did it for 16 years. I was an assistant public defender starting in 1983 and became a senior assistant relatively quickly because of the turnover in the office, but nothing to do with my qualifications. But I then ran for the job in 1990, was the elected public defender, and re-elected a couple times in 94 and 98. Loved the job. But what I did in that job has really affected a lot of the things that I'm doing now and the way I look at things. Hopefully you all know that the priorities I've set for myself to work on and for the city while I'm mayor are public education, public safety, and economic development. And it really, what I got from being public defender is, number one, a sense of the real relationship between crime and economic development. That if people feel unsafe, then people aren't going to take advantage of all the great things in the city. But also the relationship between education and public safety issues. Most of my clients were high school dropouts. I would say, easily 90% were high school dropouts, maybe higher. The juvenile clients that I represented, and there were many, particularly in my last few years as public defender, I sort of specialized in representing young kids accused of some very serious crimes. I represented a 12-year-old accused of murder, a 14-year-old girl accused of murder. Uniformly, were truants or dropping out. And again, I'm not saying that as an excuse or an explanation for someone's criminal conduct or saying that that is the answer to everything. But it is just a fact that if you go into the criminal justice system, everybody you're going to meet, for the most part, is a dropout, and every kid you're going to meet in juvenile detention is not going to school. So to me, it was pretty clear that there is a connection between having good schools and keeping kids in schools and having a safe city and having a city that is going in the right direction. So I have made graduation rates, school attendance, major concerns of mine. And part of it boils down to this, and it comes from, I won't mention the case, but working with kids who accused of some very serious things, who missed days and days of school. I mean, literally, you look at their school record for a year, and they would have missed 3 or 4 months. And you just say, how can a 13 or 14-year-old kid miss 3 or 4 months of school in one of the best cities in America, in a city with incredible affluence and resources, and no one do anything about it? That no one would do anything about it. How could that happen? And one of the things I've learned as mayor, working on these dropout issues, is I've talked to kids who have been truant a lot, or kids who have dropped out. And one of the things I think it just comes across all the time is that it's like we don't notice what's going on with some of these kids. I talked to a group of kids once. They were all, some had dropped out, some had thought about dropping out and stayed in, and some were sort of on the fence right now. And the stories were, well, here's a typical story. It was a young guy who basically stopped, had attendance problems in the 7th and 8th grade. I mean, he just wouldn't go to school for, probably missed a month or more during those times. He would get some letters from the court or letters from the school system. Nothing ever happened. His parents didn't do anything about it, so he just kept going. Gets to 9th grade, he starts missing even more school. He's missing months of school. He gets a threatening letter from the court. He gets some letters from the school. Nothing happens. His parents don't care. Sophomore year, he virtually just stops going to school and eventually drops out. And then he knows he screwed up. I mean, he was working for a pizza place. He knew his future was limited. He knew that if he had made a different choice and just stayed in school, he may have had more choices in his life. But and his exact words were sort of like, he said, well, the school didn't seem to care. My parents didn't care. So I didn't care. And he just stopped. And that's how it happens. It's not like a kid wakes up in the morning and says, I think it's a good career move for me to stop going to school. I'm gonna drop out. I'll send my application in to drop out. It happens like everything else does in life. You just kind of slowly make that decision without even thinking about it. Then the story that brought it home was a girl who was there who told me a story about her experience with being truant. She was, I think, a sophomore or junior, and she had been missing a lot of school because her mother had died. And she had apparently no relationship with her father. It was just father, I can't just assign blame or anything. She had no relationship with her father. Her father, she was obviously going through a grieving process. She was depressed. There was nobody at home to help her. And so she had a normal reaction, I would think. She just started sleeping in. She started, staying up late. She didn't want to come to school, didn't want to face the day, and she stopped going to school. Right? But the difference was here that there was a teacher she had who noticed she wasn't there. And so the teacher came to her, went to her home and said, what's going on? And so she cried and told her what was going on, and the teacher said, this doesn't have to happen. We can do something, we can figure something out. We can help you. And so when I talked to her, she was happy, back in school, and on the right direction. And I don't know who the teacher was, but if I did, I'd like to thank her. But what she did was, she did what we have to do as a city, which is to let these kids know that we care. That we care that if they don't go to school. We care if they drop out. We want them to stay in school. We want them to attend school. That it's important to us. And it doesn't have to be all, smiles and pats on the back. It can be, a sort of a harsh call. Why weren't you in school today? We missed you. If you don't come to school, we're going to invite your parents and you to come to the meeting in the principal's office in 2 days to talk about what the problem is. If you don't come to school, we're going to ask you to go to our attendance center to explain to the juvenile court why you're not in school. At some point, it's just letting people know that it's something that we care about. I often say that talking about attendance, there's John Irving, the great writer, wrote this book, Hotel New Hampshire, where there's a wrestling coach who sort of says to his students, you got to get obsessed and you got to stay obsessed. And what I think we have to do as a city, just do it, just to humor me, do it for a year, 2 years. We need to get obsessed and we need to stay obsessed about attendance. We need to get obsessed and we got to stay obsessed about kids actually being in school. We've made progress. I talked about this all last year. And by the midpoint of last year, we got to the point where we were taking attendance in every period of the day. Because what happens in high school is, as we all know who've been in high school, there are chances to find liberation throughout the day. But we got to take attendance every period. And so we moved from, at the beginning of the year, I don't know, the figures of attendance were down in the below 50%, people taking attendance, to pushing up toward 80, 90%, 100%. We got to do that. And then we got to make sure that we're able, in real time, if a kid misses 3 days in a row for unexcused absences, we need to get him and his family into the school and say, what's going on? And I think we're working on that and getting that done. The Dr. Register is focused on this. And you can hear Chief Surpass is very eloquent on this subject. Chief Surpass, you can go and the police can do this. They can go sit outside a high school and just watch the kids walk away. And they do, and what they do then is they pick them up and they bring them to the attendance center, which is the place we established to bring the resources together to make sure we get the kids back on the right track. But Chief Surpass sees very directly the correlation between crime increase, particularly property crime increase, and kids not showing up for school. I mean, most kids who don't show up for school aren't committing crimes, but there is a number of them who are just getting into trouble. So it's worth approaching that from a public safety point of view too. So that's one of the things I took from some of the things I learned when I was public defender, is just the importance of education, the importance of letting our kids know that we value them as people, that we value them as citizens, and we want them to do well. Ultimately, I would say in terms of, again, doing the public interest, public service sort of work, it's very rewarding. One of my favorite experiences after I first got elected mayor was I took my car to have it, the oil change, whatever, at some place on Church Street, and left it there. I said, I'll just walk into work and I'll just leave it here. So I'm walking down the street and I'm passing a bus stop and a guy yells over at me, hey, don't I know you? And I'll just keep going. And he said, no, hey, Mr. Dean. And I went over and talked to him and he said, I was a client of yours. So I said, okay, good. How did it work out? And, yeah, I was a little apprehensive, So he said, no, I said, there wasn't any big deal. I said, you got, it was a misdemeanor thing. It was, and you got probation for me, and everything's fine now. This is going back 20 years now. I've been out of that. I've been gone from the public defender's office since 1999. And he said, this is back in the 80s, and he said, you got me probation, and I got my life in order, and I'm working at Vanderbilt. And I just want to say thank you. And so, it's sort of like, I didn't remember him from Adam. I mean, I had, I don't know how many different clients, thousands. But I don't know if I ever did any good as public defender. I really don't. You never know what you do in life. But I felt right then that I did something good for this guy. I mean, he got a chance to turn his life around, and his probation officer and the court probably helped him more. But it made a difference. And so that's what, I guess my final words of advice would be for the professions. There are just a lot of opportunities out there, a lot of things to look at, a lot of possibilities, and I would encourage you to think of the public sector, think of the public interest areas, because it can be very, very rewarding. And I'd be happy to entertain questions. They don't have to either. All right. Thank you.
I don't quite know how to put it, but it was really curious to me. What really struck me in your talk is this your own biography, maybe, where do you think that comes from? And also in relationship to the professions. I mean, it made me think one way of thinking about the professions is a particular way of caring, right? The law provides a way of caring that I never really thought of until I heard you speak. Medicine provides a way of caring, education, a way of caring. I don't know if that word means anything to you, but it really, when you talk, I really felt, damn, this guy cares. And I don't know, I felt good.
Well, I think, I guess what I didn't say it as clearly as I should. I mean, for me, having done the work as a public defender, the astounding thing to me is that how important it's been in my life and how formative it has been in the things I sort of believe and the way I look at the world. It happened to me by happenstance. I mean, if Ann hadn't said, Karl, Nashville's where we belong, I probably would have stayed in that law firm. I was very happy in that law firm. And, I can't envision a scenario where I would have gone from that law firm if I'd stayed in Massachusetts and done public interest work. Maybe it could have happened, I don't know. I might have been involved in politics because I enjoyed that. But I can't envision me ever having done this public interest work. And then when I came to Nashville, when I came back and looked for the job, if the DA had hired me, I have an immense respect for what district attorneys do, and I just hired a former district attorney to work in my office. But I would have been a different approach to how I looked at the law. And I think by the fact that there was an opening in the public defender's office, the fact that I got to work with some really high quality people, made all the difference. And so the message I try to get across when I talk to law students in particular is just don't close the door to things. Be open to it. I mean, I'll admit to it, I had this terrible bias where I thought anything in the public sector couldn't be as good as what's going on in the private sector. And the irony is, if we started off talking about mass transit, it's sort of like saying, if you're working in the public sector, you're taking the bus, and if you're working in the private sector, you're taking the fancy car. And that's a terrible way to look at the world. And if you look at the world that way, or you look at your profession that way, you're going to miss a lot of opportunities, you're going to miss a lot of possible learning experiences, and things that you couldn't get anywhere else but the public sector or in public interest work. I was brought up in a small town, a very sort of safe environment, not an affluent place, but a very safe and nurturing environment. And I didn't instinctively understand all the things that go on in a city like Nashville that you would see working in a public defender's office. So to me, it was, in many ways, was a very much of a learning experience. The caring part for people just is, I think that's important for any profession. I mean, because basically, most professions mean you're dealing directly with a person, a client, a patient. And if you don't care about them, I think you're beat before you start. I mean, you've got to care. And for attorneys, we're advocates. And part of the thing that I didn't dwell on this much in my talk, but what I really also liked about being a public defender was you're in the battle all the time. I mean, you're in court. And if you like being an advocate, if you like going to court, if you like that situation, which I love, it's very, very rewarding. Yes?
In addition to showing the city how you care for people, you've also shown how you care for the environment with your Green Ribbon Committee and this afternoon Live on the Green. Can you talk about how that's affecting, or tying the two together, caring for people?
Well, first, let me thank you for bringing that up. Live on the Green, free rock music downtown at the courthouse. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock tonight. It's good. It's a good show. Well, the environment, I'll say this. We created this Green Ribbon Committee where to focus on making Nashville the most, the greenest city in the Southeast. And so when I said that, a lot of people thought, that's interesting. You got a long way to go. And that's true. We do have a long way to go. But I do believe very firmly that if you set expectations low, if you say, oh, we just want to have a little bit more recycling, or we want to just, plant some trees, then people are going to meet those low expectations. If you set high expectations, people will meet them. And if you're fortunate enough to be living in a great city like Nashville, you know you can meet the high expectations. There is this incredible pent-up desire, which I have been happy to see, about this city moving forward on issues of sustainability. I mean, people really want to do it, and they get excited about it, and it makes them happy to work on those issues. And to me, it goes back to this whole idea of how we're going to position ourselves as a city for the future. Young folks who are making decisions about where they're going to start their careers, where they're going to raise their families, are going to be looking for cities that are environmentally sensitive, that are going to create an environment where you can walk, where you can bike, where you can breathe clean air, where you can have access to green space, where you have access to mass transit, where there's a pride in the city itself. And if you don't have that, we're not going to get those smart young people. The people who are graduating from Vanderbilt aren't going to stay in Nashville anymore. So to me, it's in our economic interest to do it. And I think we can do it. Again, I think, clearly Charlotte and Austin is a little ahead of mass transit, but there are things we can do to catch up, and we will. One of the great strengths Nashville has is if we get you here, and I'm an example of this, if you get people here, people stay. And it's because of the high quality of life and all the attractions that we have here and the way that you can live here in a very comfortable way and have a good life. Any other? Yes?
I kind of want to get back to what Graham was trying to get at here. And you mentioned the young woman, the young girl who was depressed after the loss of her mother, and the teacher who came to see about her and got her back on the right track. Is there somebody in your young life who might have influenced you to be sort of give you a compassion that you might not have had you with this issue? Maybe something in your youth that my grandmother was an attendance teacher, and she used to go and pick up kids who weren't going to school, and they said, I don't have any shoes, and she'd take them to buy shoes and give them pencils and things. And I always got your grandmother got me in school. Is there somebody in your life that got you on the road to?
No, I really had a very boring childhood, but I was, I really benefited from, I had parents who loved me, parents who were always there for me, and they still love me, I think, and they, I had really good teachers. I went to I grew up in a small town, a small unaccredited high school that had its issues, but the teachers there were very committed to the students, and I felt I got a lot of individual attention, which sort of gave me a lot of more confidence probably than I should have. That's been important to me too, because the way I look at schools, I do think that the worst thing that can happen to a kid is they get lost in some big organization or some big system where no one's paying attention, no one sees them as an individual. I had this fortunate enough to go to a school that was smaller just because the town was smaller. I never felt anonymous or anything like that, which I do think that's a problem for all over the country for kids right now, is they don't feel they're part of something. They just feel they're in something. Nothing. But in terms of understanding, I think the issues of the importance of looking out for people, the public defender experience was key to me. Is the key experience, one of the key experiences of my life. Yes.
Yeah, Mayor, thank you for your talk. Graham opened this session pointing out that there's a decline in institutions in terms of how people see them, their importance and relevance. And could you associate the decline of institutions, as well as government, churches, whatever, with this issue of care? Because institutions perhaps represent for people structural, social, systemic ways in which their lives are governed, and people don't sense that those institutions are those systems that govern their lives, that they are caring institutions. And
I mean, that's, I mean, that's key. I think, institutions like professions, if you look at it that way, have to be caring and have to let the people know who they're working with that you care, that it really matters what happens to them and what the results matter. I guess certainly some institutions seem to be weaker than over time and in the course of my lifetime than others. But sometimes some institutions I think are even stronger. I mean, I'm a product of the 70s, and I think universities as a whole right now are probably stronger institutions than they were when I was in college or even in grad school. I mean, I look at Vanderbilt Law School now, and I see all the different opportunities it offers its students in terms of getting involved in different things and ways to further their education that weren't opportunities I had. I think back of the universities in the 70s, there was a lot more turmoil, a lot less sense of direction of what their role in the community was. They were more confused, I think, just because of I went to Columbia undergrad, so you talk about turbulence. I mean, I was there after all the things that occurred in the late 60s, and I think particularly almost every major university in the 70s was just sort of trying to find its way to what their proper role was in society. And I think most universities have found a pretty good spot right now, and they are more active in their communities and more positive than they were when I was in college age or even in professional school. Other institutions have not done as well. I think government, it's just a continual challenge. I mean, government should be there to serve the people. Government should be there to actually deliver services in a way that is not wasteful and is meaningful and helps nurture the body politic. In Nashville, I think we're fortunate that we've got we have a good system of government with the metropolitan government having the unified county city government. We have in many ways, a very progressive city. One of the things I think is a great thing about Nashville is that Nashvillians really love their city, and Nashvillians are really proud. And we don't talk about this as much because we're modest too. But they really are. I mean, Nashvillians think that we're moving forward and that we're a city on the rise, which we are, but that we want to do what's right. And if you get down to a point where the citizens of Nashville are asked to make a decision between going forward or going backwards, they generally go forward. And a good example of this would be the English-only vote that occurred in January. I mean, I was a little nervous about that, got involved in it, and a lot of other people got involved in it across all political spectrums and all areas. And it got beat handily. And so, but I think part of it was people understood just how divisive that measure was, sort of how mean-spirited, and how it could hurt the city economically in other ways. But also people sort of this is moving the city backwards. And we're not about that. We pride ourselves on moving forward. And so when the campaign was going on that issue, I think instinctively Nashvillians sort of figured out we need to beat this thing. And we did. And so we're in a position where we can say that we're the only major city in America who was tested on that. And we're the only major city that passed that test. And so that's something to be proud of. Yes, sir.
Question's going to go towards community, but first I'd like to thank you for Live on the Green. I went last week. I've been trying to see the dairy trucks fan for 2 years. So I thank the city for providing that opportunity to me. What I would like to ask you about is development in the city and the contrast of projects that were proposed, like Bell's Bend, kind of extending the reach of the city, and the pride that would come with a project like that being clean, green, kind of the warm factors you were talking about earlier, and projects like the new convention center downtown that's more located in the CBD, and how do you think those two projects are going to build community and unity in the greater city of Nashville with all of your constituents?
That's a big question. I can do 10 minutes or more on the convention center alone. Just support it. The convention center downtown it's a vital investment in our city. The convention center is us saying that we want to invest in the number 2 employer in this county, which is tourism. Tourism is 57,000 employees. So it's not a downtown issue. I mean, there are about 6,000 people who live downtown. Tourism employs 57,000 people. It is an enormous generator of non-property tax revenue for our city. If we're going to be in that business, and we're going to stay in that business, we need to invest in that business. And we've missed about 299 conventions because the facilities we have right now is too small. We have invested an incredible amount of money, past mayors, past councils in our downtown. When Mayor Fulton built the old convention center, what was missing downtown in 1987? Well, you didn't have a convention center, so we didn't know whether downtown would work for convention business. In 1987, you didn't have LP Field, you didn't have the Sun A Center, you didn't have the Hall of Fame, you didn't have the Frisk, you didn't have the Gulch, you didn't have the Skirmerhorn. Second Avenue didn't have the Wild Horse or any of the restaurants it has. The Ryman had not been renovated yet by Gaylord. And Lower Broadway did not have the great honky tonks. It had some other businesses that I had some involvement with as public defender. Downtown had nothing. Downtown had nothing. So Mayor Fulton builds this convention center, and what happens? You get all the things I just listed. And I'm not saying they came, all of them, because of that, but that was the first large public investment in our downtown. Since then, you have residents going downtown, and we have a booming downtown. We have to keep the thing moving, and that's building a new convention center. I gave a talk this week about my vision for how development should occur, and what I believe should happen is we need to build on the infill of the city. We need to build an existing infrastructure. We need to build along existing commercial corridors. Which is not to say that every speck of green space in Davidson County has to be preserved. That'd be crazy. But we need to have a plan to preserve green space, but we need, I think, to work on existing infrastructure. The core of the city. We don't need, I'm for more density, less sprawl. I talked a lot about one of the great success stories, I think, that happened last year here in Nashville is Vanderbilt at 100 Oaks. I mean, this is a classic example of what we should be doing. I mean, here you have an old mall in the first ring of suburbs around a city. Every mayor in America is dealing with this issue. And the malls are not doing as well, and then they build malls out in the second ring and the third ring. And this first ring is where the real problems are. So you have this mall at 100 Oaks, it's not doing as well. When I was in law school, it was a place to go. All right, so Vanderbilt buys it, puts in a state-of-the-art medical facility, creates hundreds of jobs. That whole neighborhood is revitalized. I mean, that's exactly the type of thing we should be doing. That's great work, and we need to be doing that in other places. And there are commercial corridors and existing infrastructure, such as where the convention center is going to go, that we need to develop before we sprawl. And if you're going to have mass transit, you're going to have the density. You can't just keep building out and creating more expenses for infrastructure and expect mass transit to follow. It just doesn't happen that way. So my vision, and it's more than a governmental vision, it's going to take buy-in from neighborhood groups, it's going to take buy-in from developers, it's going to take buy-in from the council and everybody else, is that we need to look at building on existing infrastructure and build on existing corridors and create more density. Yes?
Mayor, can we get, when you start looking at a light rail system, can the first place you look be between here and 100 Oaks, Vanderbilt and 100 Oaks?
Well,
is there a possibility of getting, one of the doctors I work with gave me this idea and said, what a great idea it would be, and they actually tagged me to promote it in the city, light rail from Vanderbilt to 100 Oaks.
well,
You can think about it, just think about it.
Let me just put the light rail thing into perspective. I mean, there's two things going on here. You have within the county, which is MTA, and we've made a lot of progress with buses. I mean, the buses, we bought hybrid buses, we got the new Music City Central. We're going to start on Gallatin Road at the end of this month, bus rapid transit. These are the buses that go longer distance before they stop, faster commute. They have the ability to keep the light green as the bus is approaching the lights. So you're probably thinking you get in your car, you follow that bus. But we're doing that, and then on the regional effort, we've worked very hard this last year with all the surrounding counties and the surrounding towns to work together to begin a regional effort on mass transit. And we were successful in the legislature getting the legislature to pass a bill that gave local governments or regions the ability to create dedicated funding sources for mass transit. That's an enormous first step. But the next step is we have to figure out what that revenue source is going to be. And we have to finish the plan, which will involve not just Davidson County, but all the counties. We're the hub, but it's going to involve all the counties, and then move forward. This week was the first meeting of a private group, and this is where Vanderbilt, this is where you ought to get involved in, is we created what's called the Transit Alliance, which is where the private sector can help promote mass transit, promote transportation solutions for Middle Tennessee. And it's going to play a key role in this, particularly for public education, so I would encourage you to get involved with that. But I'll keep 100 Oaks and Vanderbilt in mind. That's a good. Yes?
I was attending a dinner in Atlanta about 2 weeks ago that was hosted by the Mexican consul. And I was privileged to sit at a table with numerous other consuls from other countries. At my table was the French consul, the consul from Denmark, Liechtenstein, and 2 or 3 other countries. And the very first question that I was asked when they found out I was from Nashville was, when are you going to build a high-speed rail from Atlanta, or between Atlanta and Nashville? And the more I thought about that, the more I thought that could really open up some economic opportunities for Nashville. So I hope that somewhere in the planning for high-speed rail, there might be some long-range plans for a connection between Nashville and Atlanta. It would be more to Nashville's advantage, I would think,
Right.
than Atlanta.
Well, unfortunately, right now, what the federal government's released, the state of Tennessee is getting pretty much bypassed in almost all these plans. I mean, clearly, I think everybody in Tennessee would like to see high-speed rail from someplace coming to Tennessee. And those plans are in their infant stage, and hopefully they can be changed. But, I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with you on that. That's largely a federal issue. But right now, Tennessee's not in the plans at all. The state is not in the plans, which I don't know why. You can guess, I guess. Yes?
You mentioned the federal government. Right now, it seems with the recession, the change in administration at the federal level, the healthcare debate, a variety of other things, my assessment is there's a level of fear in this country right now and angst that we haven't seen in quite a while, certainly since 9/11 and maybe a lot longer. Does that come into play in your role and the role of metro government? Do you feel that or sense that fear, particularly fear of big government, perhaps?
Well, certainly this summer with all of these town hall meetings and sort of the emotions that have been involved in some of the health debates makes you think that we're at a sort of a unique time in history in terms of divisiveness and distrust of the government. I don't know if I accept that. I mean, talking to people, if you look back over the last 8 years with President Bush, and I mean, that was very divisive too. And and right now, I don't think we've reached the level that we were back in the early stages of the Iraq War in terms of how divided the country is. I mean, we could get there very rapidly, I suppose, in terms of being divided. It seems that we are sort of a 50-50 country. And it seems to me that the national political parties, both parties, have erred on the side when they're the party not in power of being, I think, almost too critical or too divisive in their attack on the party in power. And right now, I think the danger would be that we go down that road again and we just split 50-50 and we don't get anything done. But overall, let me just say, I'm pretty optimistic about almost everything. I'm lucky to be the mayor of this city and not be in Congress or anywhere else. I'm the mayor of this city, which is a great city, and I can say that, and I say this without any hesitancy at all, that if you're looking around trying to decide where you're going to live when you go out of school, if you stay in Nashville, right now you're going to be coming to a great city. But I guarantee you a year from now it's going to be a better city. 2 years will be a better city. 5 years, a much better city. That's going to happen. You can count on it. You can take it to the bank. Not many other mayors can say that, and I say that without any question at all. I believe very much that I think as a country that we're going to be fine. I think we're coming out of this recession. We've learned a lot from it. We've learned the importance that we got to be investing in the future. We got to be investing in education. We've sort of lost sight of the big thing, which is having smart people go to college and graduate and get good jobs and build a sound economy and a strong foundation. I think we figured out what we got to do. I think President Obama understands that. I think Obama's been fantastic on education issues. I mean, for me, the things I've been talking about, charter school reform, innovations at the school level, they're helping. I mean, they're saying the exact same thing, and he came down on the right side of that. There's always going to be noise out of Washington. There's always going to be, there's more political theater than ever because of talk radio and the TV shows and all that. But fundamentally, I think the country we're going to be fine. I really do. I'm very optimistic. That's a good point to stop, right? Thanks.